who grew up in a Europe where it was perceived war will never happen. We are a community of values, has been basically majorly challenged, some would say, trampled. This must be particularly relevant for you, Madam Secretary, and in this case, Frau Kollegin, because you grew up in a Europe where it was perceived war will never happen. We are a community of values, has been basically majorly challenged, some would say, trampled. This must be particularly relevant for you, Madam Secretary.
Thank you. Okay, Moscow's got it. You can continue.
Sounds like a declaration of war. Yeah.
This must be particularly challenging for you, Madam Secretary, Frau Regierungsrätin, because you have devoted your professional life to the connects between education and assistance to both the young ones and those in need. You, after attending the cantonal school in Sargans, Switzerland, you became a special education teacher in Trübach, and then parallel to that, you studied special needs education and finished in 2006 with an MA in the Intercantonal University of Creative Education in Zurich, Switzerland. And from then on, you worked on creative education centers in Schaan, but you also continued your training in organizational development and coaching in Bad Ragaz in Switzerland. In 2008, you became a member of the board of directors with the special education school and center in Schaan. And by 2010, you also then assisted and cared for the in this case the organization was the Liechtenstein Alten- und Krankenhilfe, but you cared for the elder. And I was actually bewildered when I read through your CV, which then obviously culminated that by after 2017, you have become a member of the government of the Principality of Liechtenstein, and served obviously as Minister of Education, importantly as Minister of Environment, but also very specially as Minister for the Interior, Home Affairs, which deals with everything and many of the issues which we are faced now to as well. And then since last year, you exchanged internal affairs with foreign affairs and have become the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Education and Sport. In a time when values, when intergenerational relations, and very importantly, when the role of the young ones and their shock experience to deal with a concrete war within their community, in that time, I think you must be in high demand, Prime Minister, from many different sources. And it is for me a particular pleasure to be able, with my friend Andy, to welcome you here at the Liechtenstein Institute, whose mission has always been to connect active realpolitik with the best of academia and the brightest of the members. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Dear Professor Moravcek, dear Professor Braunschweig-Gruber, dear faculty, dear students, it's a great honor to speak at the Liechtenstein Institute on Self-Determination. And I really thank you that you are going to join me. My speech topic freedom and self-determination in times of aggression. As you mentioned before, both of you, these are challenging times. We are at a crucial point in history. Aggression and self-determination are two topics that have always played a central role in our multilateral foreign policy over the past 20 years. And Princeton University has been a key partner on both. In Ukraine, these two issues come together in the most dramatic fashion. We have witnessed a frontal aggression against Ukraine, a founding member of the United Nations, and an assault on the international rule of law of historic gravity, and a country who is very close to our home. This has also been a direct attack against the founding principle of the United Nations, the ultimate guardian of state sovereignty also for Liechtenstein. The Liechtenstein government has strongly condemned this aggression. Together with our partners in the United States and Europe, we will be steadfast and persistent in our solidarity with Ukraine and in our resolve to ensure accountability for the crimes committed in this illegal war. I am shocked by the reports of atrocious war crimes committed by the Russian armed forces. But Liechtenstein is also keen to see the prosecution of the decision itself to launch the invasion of Ukraine, the crime of aggression. There is no more appropriate place to talk about this than here in Princeton. The agreed definition of the crime of aggression was forged in arduous and year-long negotiation here in Princeton, in a process chaired by Liechtenstein and facilitated by the Liechtenstein Institute, which has played a key role in the process leading up to this consensus. One question imposes itself these days, and that is whether we are witnessing a larger paradigm shift in international relations, away from a rules-based international order towards a rule by force and military made, away from the common and agreed principles enshrined in the UN Charter and the Helsinki Final Act, towards non-cooperative concepts of security, chaos, and unpredictability, away from a strict prohibition of the use of force in international relations to a new era of aggression in interstate relations. As grave as the violations we witness are, and let me be clear, Russia is breaking the rules in the most fundamental ways. We are also seeing a very broad coalition of states ready to defend the established international order. When the United Nations General Assembly addressed the aggression against Ukraine on the 2nd of March, just 4 states voted with Russia: Eritrea, North Korea, Syria, and Belarus, which is of course part of the aggression against Ukraine. The international isolation of Russia is striking. As the auguries of a new imperialism become visible, the political power of the international community should not be underestimated, nor should the power of the private sector, whose response has been unprecedented. In addition to the unprovoked assault on a neighboring country, we are witnessing a systematic attempt to undermine international law by using established legal concepts in clearly absurd manners. Russia's recourse to the right to self-defense in accordance with Article 51 of the UN Charter, or its misuse of the concept of genocide, are a case in point. The question is, will our collective action be commensurate to the challenge ahead, which is to save and reunite around the fundamental tenets of our post-World War II international order. We are clearly all grappling with the long-term consequences of the ongoing turmoil, and we will be facing very fundamental questions in the coming months. How do we ensure that the United Nations remains the center of the rules-based international order? How can we move forward on disarmament, convention, and nuclear? How can we safeguard the central and fundamental role of international law? And how do we do this without being distracted from the challenge of our time, climate change? But let me give you Liechtenstein's perspective on the question what the fundamental tenets of an international order actually are. At the very core for us stands international law, in particular the right of peoples to self-determination as the bedrock of any international order worth its name. The dramatic situation in Ukraine shows us how intimately self-determination is linked to the principles of the sovereign equality of states, territorial integrity, and of the friendly settlement of disputes, principles that have guided the creation of the United Nations from the ashes of the World War II. Aggression, or the illegal use of force in interstate relations, is an antithesis. It is sometimes forgotten that after the World War II, it was the world's superpowers that committed to these principles as guarantors of global stability and prosperity. Without any doubt, they have also been instrumental for states like Liechtenstein that do not wield either economic or military might in the conduct of their relations. The implementation of the right of self-determination is one of the success stories of the United Nations. It has led millions of people into freedom. Think of the successful process of decolonizing large parts of the world. It has helped the creation of groundbreaking international law. Think of the two human rights conventions, which are anchored in Common Article 1, on the right to self-determination or the successful drive to outlaw aggression internationally. The Sustainable Development Goals are generational achievements only possible at the United Nations are nothing less than a goal. To realize the human right to development, which is a primary expression of the right to self-determination. This does not mean that the United Nations does not suffer from flaws. Its most serious one has just become very obvious to all. The Security Council, the UN's main organ, primarily in charge of peace and security, has been dysfunctional for a while and could be much more so in the future. We have advocated for years that the General Assembly must step in where the Security Council is paralyzed, as it did in the case of Ukraine. We will need to be innovative and committed to keep the UN at the center of global governance. Some will, of course, question fundamentals, such as who serves permanently on the Council, or whether the veto is anachronistic. In these difficult discussions, we cannot lose focus. Self-determination holds the key to mitigate tension, strengthen accountability and good governance, and uphold international law. We are deeply convinced this to be true as the nature of warfare evolves towards more frequent interstate conflicts and towards hybrid high-tech and low-pressure attacks in the cyber realm. As Liechtenstein became a member of the United Nations, we saw the need to codify the right to self-determination. We have since moved to more practice-oriented approaches, continue to invest politically and financially in strengthening the principle of self-determination in international relations. I am grateful that since its inception, the Liechtenstein Institute on Self-Determination here at Princeton University has been a close and trusted partner in this effort. It has provided the space to have open-minded and academic discussions on aspects of self-determination and to serve as an interface to feed those discussions back into the policy discourse. It has contributed to policy advancements in such various fields as international criminal law, women, peace and security, children and armed conflict, mediation and conflict prevention, and recently on sea level rise, climate change and migration. The Institute ought to continue to be on the forefront when we address the current challenges to the established international order. As Liechtenstein's Minister of Foreign Affairs and Education, I am proud to have the LISD as a partner that exemplifies so strongly the fruitful synergies between academia and foreign policy. Let me take a moment here to talk about how we in Liechtenstein think about self-determination and sovereignty. Liechtenstein has existed for more than 3 centuries and has been continuously sovereign as a nation for over 200 years. No forced change to the border, no occupation, no wars on our territory, and all of this during extreme turmoil in Europe, the spectre of which we see reappear. In the conduct of our relations to other states, we do not rely on military power or defense agreements. International law has always been the foundation of our security and of our ability to execute our sovereign right to determine our own future and our relationship with other countries. Attempts to take away that right from a country will always amount to grave violations of international law, and Ukraine is a tragic and telling example of that. We as Liechtenstein can only think of our sovereignty in terms of cooperation, multilateralism, integration and the rule of law. Never, and I really want to mention it, never in terms of isolation, confrontation or aggression towards other nations. Integration has been our path to stability, prosperity and freedom, first in the form of a customs union with Switzerland, then as part of the EEA and European single market. In the same vein, we have always rejected the view that sovereignty of one nation can be advanced as a reason to infringe on the sovereignty of other nations. To say otherwise is wrong conceptually, as the principle of sovereignty includes that it be recognized by others. Conceptual clarity on that point provides good guidance when we listen to attempts by Russia to justify its aggressive behavior against its neighbors. There are those who think today that the post-World War II multilateral order no longer reflects the realities of the 21st century, and that its shortcomings make it impossible. To them I respond that aggression has led us straight into global warfare several times before. This should teach us not to abandon the principles and tools we have developed in response, including holding perpetrators of the gravest international crimes to account. This is our call to double down on our efforts to support the rules-based international order. International solidarity is key in addressing grave violations of international law, and we support all efforts at policy coordination across the Atlantic. For Liechtenstein, there is no question that we fully apply the strong and comprehensive sanctions imposed by the European Union on Russia and Belarus in close coordination with the United States. On the very first day Russian troops began attacking Ukraine, I had an important exchange with Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman, and I am grateful for the efforts the US administration puts into reaching out to its partners. The bottom line of our discussion: the US is fully committed to defending the values of freedom and democracy, to securing a strong, peaceful, and resilient Europe, and to advancing the transatlantic partnership. Liechtenstein welcomes that commitment, as the current crisis makes it abundantly clear how important the partnership with the United States is for the European continent. At the same time, Liechtenstein consistently advocates for keeping doors open and discussion formats alive. As long as there is a chance to come back to a form of cooperative security in Europe, it is worth investing in it. The OSCE remains the format for security policy and for a European security architecture. We stand for diplomacy, which has played a key role in securing our existence as a state. But diplomacy must not be accompanied by the threat of use of force, by a simultaneous campaign of brutalizing a civilian population. The world demands that Russia stop hostilities and withdraw its troops completely and unconditionally. This will create the necessary space for diplomacy and perhaps mediation. And diplomacy is also based on a basic level of mutual trust. A genuine negotiation with a counterpart who engages in public disinformation and obvious and absurd falsehoods is hardly imaginable. Finally, it is well known that Liechtenstein has been a staunch supporter of international criminal justice, with the International Criminal Court in a very central role. It has never been more obvious why we need the ICC than today. We have called, together with others, that the court expedite its proceedings on Ukraine, while of course continuing its ongoing investigations. War crimes are committed systematically and before our eyes. Those responsible must be prosecuted. But so must those who have made the decision to launch this illegal war in the first place. The General Assembly has with overwhelming support called this an act of aggression. Individual criminal responsibility results from this under international law. We are working with others to find a way to apply this law in an internationally backed format. There can be no peace without justice. Not in any situation, and certainly not the case of Ukraine. Liechtenstein will stand with the international law. Liechtenstein will stand with the Ukraine. And I'm now really looking forward with pleasure to your views and to our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Audience on the television program, and we'll now move to the in-house discussion, which will be then summarized